Thank you for moving back up here. I know there's really rich conversations going on, and I often reflect when I'm sitting in your position, some of the most valuable opportunities are over those lunch and afternoon tea breaks. But we also understand that in order for us to be able to advance those conversations, it's important to hear from the people with experience that we've brought into the room. And the man that I'm about to introduce to you this afternoon really needs no introduction, Sir Stephen Tindall. Margaret, along with her husband Stephen, founded the Tindall Foundation. And Stephen's going to be talking about and reflecting upon their journey in building high trust connections and partnerships with Te Ao Māori. There's a particular request that no social media recording happens during this, given that Sir Stephen would like to speak free and openly and frankly with you about the journey that he's embarked on. So we'll just ask you to respect that protocol, please. No recording, no social media. That would be wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, Sir Stephen Tindall.
Ena mana, ena reo, ena iwi. E ro rangatira ma. No mai, haere mai, piki mai. Kia ora, hui mai. Kato katoa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. It's a real privilege to be here amongst friends. And please forgive me if I'm a bit vulnerable this afternoon. Personally vulnerable, and I know Margaret will be quaking in her boots right now hearing that. But I think it probably It means to me something really important about what's been said today, and I think that it's important that I try to get that off my chest. I wanted to start by just saying that through my life I have always been an unbelievably patriotic Kiwi, a person who absolutely loves this country. And if I think back to when we did some of our America's Cup campaigns. Valencia, I took 10,000 Kiwi flags. San Francisco, 20,000, and Bermuda, another 20,000. And to see those Americans cut down our flags in Bermuda and then empty them out in the Oracle dressing room really tore my heart out. But why I say this to you is that whilst I am incredibly proud of this country, I'm not proud about what we heard today. And if I trace my own whakapapa, it goes back to just outside Birmingham, about 4 generations ago. It goes back to Ireland. My grandfather, who died when my mother was quite young, came from Edinburgh. So I'm really a product of the British Isles and Ireland. But I was born here, I've lived here for 68 years, and I really whakapapa with this place. But when I hear what we heard this afternoon from Ani Makairi, I feel guilty. I don't feel good. But this is the 250th anniversary of when Cook came to New Zealand. That's going to be celebrated in Gisborne later this year. And this is the year that we can actually make a much bigger start about healing the situation we find ourselves in. We've tried since we started the Tindall Foundation in 1994 to walk alongside people to heal situations. And I think when I heard earlier the word gift come through rather than grant, that's pretty much what we've done. We've unreservedly given our money for people to make up their own minds what they want to do with it. We actually got sick of people ringing up and asking for grant because he didn't work for us. So if I go back to the very genesis of the Tindall Foundation, we were receiving all this money from the warehouse after it had floated. We didn't have a need for it. And we wanted to spread it around New Zealand in a similar way to the way it was coming in. And so we mapped the country, we made some big allowances for deprivation, and we've tried to spread the money that way. But we started off with people that we called funding managers, and today we call them local donations managers. And they come together with us in person every couple of years. But we unreservedly give them our money for them to decide where the real need is at the coalface in the place that they actually operate. No prescriptive messages, just do what you need to do to make your place a better place. And I think when we start to talk about Māori later on in this conversation, that will be the message that we all need to carry forward from today. So I started in my great-grandfather's department store in 1970 and learnt the retail trade. And in 1982, I started the wariwhari. And after a couple of years of survival, and we started to do okay, I realised there was a responsibility for me to try to bring down the price of consumer goods for Kiwis. And so when we went into communities like Gisborne and Kaitaia and Kaikoui, we could offer them things that they could never have been able to afford before. And that felt good. And we hope that after 39 odd years, has made a difference. But what I learnt when I started the warehouse was that I had no money, I had no capital really to speak of. I cashed in my superannuation, sold the caravan, just enough to really buy a computer and some fixtures. But I'd built up this amazing trust with a whole bunch of suppliers. And the theme of today is about trust. And that trust bought me $680,000 worth of merchandise that people gave me, that I put in my first store, on the basis that I'd pay them for it if it sold. If it didn't sell, I could send it back or we would negotiate to reduce it. And that was something that was incredibly powerful, that the reciprocity in terms of trust really, really worked. And then when we started the Tindall Foundation, we had this similar type of feeling that if we became trustworthy with our brand, as the warehouse had been, then the people that we would work with around the country, and of course we didn't know many of these people to start with, so we really started to begin with the faith community. So we chose the national churches basically, and they all had their own local whānau, and they distributed our money for us initially. But it was that trust that enabled us to get the organisation going. And since then, we've given away about $185 million, and we've paid about $150 odd million in tax. There is an anomaly that every one of you in this room, if you ever bump into Grant Robertson, should mention to him, the Minister of Finance, that a charity in New Zealand, if it derives its income from a public company, cannot claim the imputation credits, and so we have ended up paying. So that's something that kind of relieves me a little bit for the people who say, you know, you have a foundation because you're dodging tax. That's not true, we've paid it. And then in another life, back in '94, we also started K1W1, which is a venture capital business, which we run today with my son Robbie and a couple of other guys. And once again, this kind of trust with young entrepreneurs was the feature of what we did. And we burned a lot of money to begin with because you don't know what you don't know, and you actually invest in things that look really good and the heart says it's good, and you do some analysis. But until you've actually done it for quite a number of years, you don't know whether it's going to work or not. And I think that's the other main theme that I'd love to get through to you today, that what I've found in investing in New Zealand businesses is that generally it takes about 15 years for them to hit their straps. There are some exceptions. We've been incredibly lucky with Peter Beck and Rocket Lab, who hit his straps much quicker. And it's great to know that we've got rockets taking off not far from Marcus here. I hope they don't keep you awake.
Other things keep me awake at
Other
night.
things keep him awake. But that's been an amazing experience, and so we've invested in over 200 startup companies in New Zealand, and the proceeds for those eventually will go back into the Tindall Foundation. We've been blessed, Margaret and I, with 5 fantastic kids who have a division now of the Tindall Foundation called Next Gen. And a number of you in this room I know some of our kids that actually work in the foundation. They know that they're not going to inherit a whole bunch of money. They don't want to. They want to keep working for New Zealand, using our wealth to do better and to make this country a better place. And then this word, trustworthiness, I think, is the thing that we have absolutely grasped on through the ages. And the same thing applies to philanthropy. The same thing absolutely applies to us in the Tindall Foundation and to all of you. If you have a fantastic trusting relationship with people, there is just an amazing amount of stuff you can do. And if I think of a conversation that John and I had yesterday with an organisation who I'm not going to name, but somebody who we empowered 5 or 6 years ago and have probably invested or gifted over $1 million to. They've worked in an area of child abuse that we thought could possibly work, and the plans look great and they had the right people, but when we really review it, it hasn't worked. And yet yesterday they declared to us that another very small organisation, a totally Māori-led organisation, had picked up something very similar recently. They were running it their way, Māori-led, and it was really, really working. And so this trust that you can put in people to do things and to do it themselves and to do it well absolutely exists in this country, and we've all got to do a lot more of it. Some of the things we've learnt over the years or so, we started a campaign 22 years ago in Kaikoui because a place of deprivation. And because we didn't know any better, we funded various things up there, none of which really worked very well. Today I'm going to tell you about something else we're doing in the far north that has started off incredibly well and I think can work, because we will gift ourselves to this organisation, and I'm positive they will make a huge difference. Some of the other things we've done around reconnecting Northland's worked very well for us so far. Grow Our Own, the Housing Foundation. So a few of us sat down about 22 years ago, I think it was now, and we recognised what we all see today, every day, with the lack of affordable housing. And we started up an organisation called the New Zealand Housing Foundation, and they now build subdivisions where you can't tell the difference between a rental, a rent to buy, a joint ownership, an owned property, a social house, or a kāmatua house. And they provide a community centre, and the wraparound services mean that those people have a really wonderful life. So there's no stigma about living in a ghetto-type area. It's inclusive. And so this foundation has done an amazing job, and that's something we have to get through more and more to the government about how these things can work. It's really quite difficult to get that sort of thing through. The Prime Minister recently talked about trying to join silos together. And we've worked with an organisation called The Hub in Christchurch, where social services are all in one place. And amazing things are happening for women that come in who have been beaten up, or various social issues. And because there's doctors and there's advocates and everybody's in there together, it gets it gets dealt with in a really, really great way. And they have been turned down for sort of joint funding recently, and so I took the opportunity to write to Jacinda Ardern to say, you want something, here it is. Just do it. So let's talk about the Māori world. The example I'd like to talk about right now is the Amakura Consortium, and I think some of you may have been in a session on that today. And what we started to do there is to help them deliver their own economic development plan, which could add much more to the north. Now, we're not going to do it, but we found some experts and we've been able to engage with these people through a high trust relationship. It started when we went up to see them with a local kaumātua that introduced us. We didn't know any of these guys, but over the last 18 months, this trust has really, really worked. And now there's some real magic happening. In fact, we had a session last week and the progress that's being made is quite remarkable. And the aspirations are that this will all be Māori-led. The people and experts we'll provide will just put some opportunities in front of them and show them the sorts of opportunities that exist that they might want to invest in, whether it's aquaculture or fishing or agriculture or forestry or housing. There's a whole bunch of things. But they will make those decisions and it will be Māori-led because we now know that absolutely works. We've taken the time to build the connections with them. And this creates a real new opportunity for us in the far north. We've been able to do it too because Cyril, who you've all got to know in the last 2 days, is one of our staff. And he's very experienced up there because he comes from the far north and he's also had 10 years of experience with Foundation North. And he's able to help build these relationships. I have to say right now, though, that we're 10 years behind the Mackenzies. And what they've done over the last 10 years has been remarkable. I can remember when my good friend Ian Hines, who I saw yesterday, and I hope he's here today, started this journey, that we kind of said to ourselves, well, let's wait and watch and see if it works, which is what we've done. But it's definitely worked. And I think if there's ever going to be a time for us now to look back and say, this journey has got to a point now where we can actually kick it off. Because there are times that I've found in business that you get to the bottom of the hockey stick, and that's the time when you really start to invest in something so that it can grow very quickly. And I believe that's the time right now. We've also, in our foundation, even though we're 10 years behind the Mackenzies, is that we've been having te reo lessons. We have a new Māori trustee, Ruku Schaffhausen, and of course Cyril's been guiding us along the way. But it's the very beginning of the journey, and I really hope that we can actually make a huge difference. We also wanted to sort of talk about how Māori development is so important to the Tindall Foundation. We think that if this model works for us in the far north, then there's no reason why we can't help to gift people the opportunity to do things in other parts of New Zealand. Some of the other things that have happened over the years for me, that gives me some heart, and I hope gives you some confidence. Ian Hines, I can see him. that we can do this together, is that there's been a number of things I got involved in and started. So I was a co-founder of the Knowledge Wave back in 2001. And it's only now, I told you that it takes time for these things to happen, but it's only now that you can really see the benefits of what happened at that Knowledge Wave. A number of you probably won't even remember it. But up until that time, we hadn't really identified how science and technology could actually help grow the New Zealand economy. And we were pretty much the first venture capital company in New Zealand with K1W1, and so we're investing in things that were very fledgling. And I remember going to a place which used to be an old IRL building in Balfour Road in Parnell, and we made our first investment in a company there called Lanzatech. And Lanzatech now is worth probably well north of $1 billion and is building these magnificent plants all over the world. And the reason we wanted to get into it was because we're very keen on clean tech. And they decided, well, in fact, the way it happened was their scientist came into my office with a test tube of liquid and said, inside this test tube is some liquid, and inside the liquid are some bacteria, and these bacteria can turn carbon monoxide into biofuel. You know, I had to trust him. It was a leap of faith. He trusted me, I trusted him. That's now worth over $1 billion US. First commercial investor. Now we've got major investors all over the world. I went to a plant in China last year that's producing something like 28 million gallons of biofuel a year. And because the Chinese have changed their mandated that you have to put ethanol into petrol, they've got a ready market. There's another plant being built in Ghent in Belgium, one with the Indian oil company. So they're now able to build plants that actually hook onto other major industries and in fact take carbon dioxide as well as carbon monoxide. But it was while I was in that building that I met a number of other people, including Peter Beck, who'd only just started from Rocket Lab. And out of that building now, we've had 5 really major successful companies. And where the trust comes in again is that when we got to a stage with Lanzatech that we realised we really needed to scale up and we needed a significant amount of capital, way more than I could provide or anyone else in New Zealand, then we went and found this guy in Silicon Valley called Vinod Khosla. And by building a relationship of trust, he was prepared to invest. He's done incredibly well with it, and as a result, he's come in and funded several more New Zealand technologies out of that same building in Balfour Road in Parnell. So trust and trustfulness is absolutely key to this whole thing. The next thing that we got involved in at about the same time was starting a thing called KIA, the Kiwi Expat Association. Apparently there's 700,000 Kiwis living offshore, and it was our great ambition to try to join them up so that they could provide expertise and knowledge back to us here in New Zealand. We've got 500,000 members now, and the way that we're connecting people who have expertise in other countries, who are Kiwis, who want to help us back in New Zealand, works incredibly well. So they provide that expertise to the companies, not just the ones we invest in, but to many, many more. In those days also, because of my clean tech aspirations, got involved in starting the New Zealand Business Council for Sustainable Development. Became a councillor on the World Business Council. So I got to see what big major industries were trying to do in the terms of sustainable development. And unfortunately, if we actually relate that to what is needed to be done, it didn't really cut it. Our second biggest issue in this country after social is environmental, and so we both at the Tindall Foundation and through K1W1, we're always looking for environmental solutions. So we've invested in a solar company. We're looking at wind at the moment. We're looking at hydrogen. We're looking at anything that we hope can lead people to believe that this country can become much more sustainable than it is already, even though we're pretty good on the world stage. But we have to try and take the Prime Minister's lead and the ETS lead that just came out a week ago, get in behind our politicians and do something about it. I was in the shower one morning and I thought, what could each individual do in this country to help mitigate climate change? Because, for example, a school kid can't do a lot. But then I thought of native trees, and so we got that modelled. And the modelling came out that if we planted 200 million trees by 2030, we could get our carbon levels back down to pre-1990 levels because of the amount of sequestration native trees basically gobble up. And so we engaged through the Tindall Foundation Project Crimson to help build that platform. We're now up to 17 million trees, but we've got a long way to go. But if you don't get involved with us in a Maori project, please do everything you can to encourage people to plant trees. And we've just yesterday got engaged with the school kids who are striking because we think they probably will be looking for some sort of solution themselves as well. And then another thing that I think has really encouraged me about how trust really works, and this is an example that Arnie talked about before, which is an imported idea. And can I recognise at the moment John McCarthy, our manager? His response to Arnie I thought was absolutely remarkable, the work that he's doing. The work that he's doing in building this movement now of us to help Māori is fantastic. And we as trustees and as family are right 100% behind him. But this was an idea that we came across, or I came across when on one of my visits to the States. And the community foundations of America had been going for just, the first ones, for just on 100 years. So we started one, the first one really that got going properly was Acorn in Tauranga. And I can see Bill Holland over here, who was one of the guys that actually guided that through to fruition. Today, just recently, we opened our 17th community foundation, and they've now raised over $150 million that goes back into place-based giving in their local communities. So this is part of our strategy of encouraging generosity. Not only that, part of their mandate is that they talk to people about giving with a warm hand instead of a cold one, which means if you can't give it while you're alive, at least put in your will something for a local cause or something that is really dear to your heart. And there's now promises of another $360 million on that basis. Generosity in New Zealand is alive and well. There have been people that have actually donated dairy farms worth, $17, $18 million. So there's some really, really great things do happen in this country, and those things make me feel really proud. I hope, and I'm sure it'll be well after I've gone, but I hope there will be a day when every one of us in New Zealand feel incredibly proud about our homogenous society. Maybe, John, the way you're going, you'll be the Wilberforce of New Zealand. He got rid of slavery. You should be able to get rid of, or we should be able to get rid of deprivation. So, in closing, just let me say that this is an opportunity just waiting to happen for all of us. I saw that great new youth initiative this morning, and I straight away went and said the Tindall Foundation's in, so I hope a lot of you have joined that as well. But we can do a lot together. And I think if we are empathetic and we do show a lot of araha, then in maybe 30 years or soon after, Māori in New Zealand will say, "You are us." Pākehā, you are us. Thanks.
Tēnā koe tā tikuni, Sir Stephen, mai o kōrero me o whakaaro rangatira ki a koutou, tēnei aihei. Ia koe kōrero ana ki te kaupapa, ka puta mai ngā whakaaro mai. Ko reira, tēnei tini mana ki a koe.
Thank you, Seamus. And Sir Stephen's kindly offered to stay on the stage and to take a few questions that have been coming in from the floor. First question, and it's really poised or linked to how you opened up your address about vulnerability and guilt. And no doubt there may be others in the room that can sympathise or empathise with that perspective when they hear those powerful messages that Ani Makairi talked about. Perhaps you can talk us through, coach us through, for those of us who are carrying a sense of guilt, if that's indeed the case, about how you might reconcile that guilt to be able to move past it into a proactive, responsive condition.
Hello. Obviously, this is something I've thought about for many years, and whilst we all should feel in some forms of guilt, you can never let that stop you from doing what needs to be done. That's just got to be the motivator. That's kind of the rocket fuel that helps you, that pushes you to want to do more. And so I would say switch the word guilt to opportunity and motivation, because we are sitting on a burning platform that we have to fix. The issues that we know, the social issues that we know that are occurring at the moment, will never, put it this way, there's been a lot of things we've tried to do through the Tindall Foundation around the edges. And John McCarthy's done a great job forming an organisation called Voice, which is for kids that have been fostered. And it is actually the kids that are going to run this. It's the same thing as we're talking about. Give to the people who have been affected the opportunity to heal themselves and to fix things themselves. But some of the other things that we've done, because they haven't worked, we've seen statistics get worse. And the more we look at that, the more we dive deep into it, we see that the whole reason is because of this relationship we have in New Zealand between Māori and Pākehā. And I'm absolutely positive if we fix that, the other things come right as well.
You talked about the importance, Sir Stephen, about funding being a process, or contribution being a process of illumination, of learning, as opposed to driving towards measures of success that are predeterminate to engaging in the relationship where learning can occur well. What do you think the role of the philanthropic sector, or its position in relationship to government, can provide for communities around this idea of building learning communities in partnership? And how might those examples influence new ways of thinking inside government?
There's been quite a number of examples where we've started something where government have then picked it up. So I think you've got to start it. If they're not already doing it and they don't want to do it, you have to do it, and then you have to show them that it works. So Grow Our Own out in Counties Manukau DHB, there were basically very, very few Māori and Pacifica staff running that hospital. And so we got together with the superintendent at the time, Geraint Martin, who now actually runs this building, and we said, let's put in place a way of getting those kids that are in school now into science, into jobs, into the hospital, so that the patients that are filling up this hospital have their own whānau looking after them. And that's been going quite a number of years now, and it's been successful. The number of Māori midwives now, I think, is up to about 40% of the total midwife population in that catchment. And so the government have seen it's a success, so they started funding it. So I think we just need to lead by example.
Question from Guinevere. How do we, and I assume that's non-Māori, deal with the grief of realising what colonisers have done and relinquishing our power and privilege? So what's the grief process that's important when that realisation hits home of what's been lost to us all?
Boy, that's a really difficult one. Thanks, Genevieve. Where are you?
Yeah.
Well, we'll have a little chat later. I think. Oh, a Mackenzie lady, eh? Yeah, I think, I've just recently lost my mother, and a lot of grief there. So I know it's pretty poignant for me at the moment what grief's all about. But you can't let grief overtake you. I think you've got to use it, as I said before, for the strength that it will give you to move forward. So we can't help what happened in the past. We're generations older, and so we've got to just try and help make it happen. And I was fascinated to hear Arnie say that, the process with the Crown was a torturous one, and they found it really hard. And yet there's been a lot of settlements of recent years. But it takes more than just settlements, doesn't it? I mean, the other phrase we've got at the Tindall Foundation is more than money. We can give lots of money if we've got it to give, but it's actually working with people and supporting them and making them feel that they are trusted that's the key thing. And so I wouldn't get really hung up on the grief. I'd get motivated about doing something about what's been, I think, generated today. And I think we are going to be able to look back. I hope I'm going to be alive long enough to go back to this day, this conference, 2019, and say that was the beginning of the Renaissance. And we really took off. And now we've made some great strides in Aotearoa.
And thank you very much, and also thank you for those people who are posting questions. I know that Sir Stephen will be able to have a chance to look at those, and maybe you'll have an opportunity to ask those to him personally as we've now run out of time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again in support of Seamus's acknowledgement to Sir Stephen Tindall.